you're in a good place now. You are listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, I want to talk about ways of staying healthy. And the ways of staying healthy is important throughout the entire year. At any time of the year, it's important to stay healthy. We all want to stay healthy. When we get sick, it adds more to our stress, our anxiety, because we can't get things done, we can't focus, we can't think clearly. When we get sick, it adds to our stress level because it adds to another dimension of things that we have to deal with, things that we don't necessarily want to deal with. You know, getting sick changes things. And sometimes it can help us put things in perspective, but usually we start looking at ways that we could have actually offset being sick, maybe ways of keeping ourselves better, and things that we were doing, burning the candle at both ends, that sort of thing, and we get angry at ourselves and self-loathe and get depressed. And so, honestly, getting sick is not our favorite thing, and it's definitely not our favorite thing during the holidays. It's not our favorite thing during holidays. It's definitely not our favorite thing on vacations. Nobody wants to be sick on a vacation, but definitely a holiday. Nobody wants to be sick during that time. And we have the holidays creeping up here, and they're coming along, and many of us are going to a lot of parties and events and doing things, and sometimes we don't always think about ways of keeping ourselves well. Sometimes we just keep pushing the envelope, thinking everything's going to be good, and then one moment we are down for the count. And during this season, and during the whole winter season for that matter, as the seasons change, many of us are dealing with seasonal affective disorder. Sad. And that can really put us into the holiday blues. It can put us into the winter blues because we're feeling sluggish. We're not feeling at our level. We're feeling beat down. You know, we're gaining weight. We're feeling listless. We feel sad. We're losing interest in activities. We're having low energy. We might even have problems with sleeping too much. We might be experiencing craving carbs a lot, having difficulty concentrating, even feeling helpless, worthless, or guilty. And so there's a lot of things that come with that. The oversleeping, the appetite changes, the weight gain, the tiredness. And this is really important because it can really, really, really affect us. And when we add that to being sick with the common flu, or cold, or COVID, or strep throat, or whatever it is that you got, you know, sinus infection, you're adding to that, and it's creating more of a beatdown. Many of you may be suffering from the holiday blues or holiday depression. You might be suffering from blues or depression, just regular blues and depression, not even based on this. But if it's specific holidays, you know, maybe there's frustration and sadness about people that have passed on. Maybe the holiday's not the same after a divorce or a death of a loved one. Many different things that are happening here. So many people are going through lots of different things. I'm sure you are as well. And understanding that component and understanding how that feels and realizing that's something that we have to deal with a lot more depth and understanding. But one of the things that we definitely want to do is eliminate any other ways that can make us feel even worse or down, because we don't want to feel any more down or any more worse or any more blues than we're already feeling. So we definitely want to nip that in the bud, and we want to move forward with that so that we're super aware of how we're feeling. So on today's show, instead of really jumping into seasonal affective disorder, because I think if any of you have it, you know what it is, you deal with it, you understand. If many of you are dealing with the holiday blues or depression, you know what that is. Or you're dealing with strict blues or depression just naturally at any time of the year, you understand what that is. On today's show, I want to get a little lighter, but I also want to give some tips and tricks on ways of staying well. Things that maybe you haven't thought of. Because sometimes we don't think about these things until we start putting two to two together. And sometimes you never think about these things. You never think about it. But it's something that we need to analyze. So the first tip that I want to offer everybody listening to the show on Live Your True Life Perspectives is an important health tip that's important for you when you're going over to other people's houses or even at your own home and you're eating. Okay, so many of us don't think about it. Like you're at somebody's house. I'll give you a good picture this, okay? You're at a holiday party. You walk in, you greet, you meet, you're shaking everybody's hands, everything's going on, giving kisses, hugs, handing the gift over to the host, doing that thing, maybe going to the bar, grabbing a drink, and walking into that other room where there's that whole entire food spread, where there's all this food and everybody's congregating and you have all kinds of things. And so the first thing that I want to remind you of is, remember, we went through the COVID situation. We went through years of hell, years of lockdown, and many of us have forgotten all of it. We've forgotten all of it. Not to say that it was good, bad, or indifferent. I'm not sitting there saying one way or another. This is not that show today. However, I have my thoughts, but it's not that show today, right? We're talking specifically about ways of staying healthy. And so I want to remind you, when you walk through that room, yes, it's great to give hugs. It's great to handshake. But remember, before you go and start eating, and before you go and put your hands in your mouth, before you go and put your hands and your fingers in your eyes or your face or whatever else, go wash your hands with soap and water. Many of us forget that because we're all engaged in saying hi to people, all that stuff. So you really definitely want to be prepared for that, because that's important. And I see a lot of people do that where they shake 17 people's hands. They go in to grab some food. The next thing you know, I see them with a cracker in one hand and some food in the other, and they're eating right out of their hand. And it's like eating out of those 17 people's hands for that moment. And I know that it's not always the easiest thing to get up and go, wash your hands. But remember, this could really, really make your life a lot easier if you really think about this. I'm not a big hand sanitizer person. I don't like it. I like soap and water a lot more than hand sanitizer. But if you're one of those kind of people that are a little bit lazy, okay, and you don't want to go run in there, or you get in there and there's not adequate soap. I mean, that's one of the worst things too, is if you're going to have a party, you want to have you need to have napkins, like napkins that are disposable for people to use, or paper towels. This 1 or 2 hand cloths in the bathroom's not going to cut it, okay? Because everybody's using the same hand cloth. It gets wet, it's yucky, it's gross. That's not going to cut it. So we definitely got to maintain some hygiene and some thought processes when we are planning a party or having people over, right? So that is very important to do, very important to acknowledge. And what I do is I normally get a big thing of paper towels. I get a thing of hand towels, and I make sure that I have enough in every bathroom that people can use. They can wash their hands, that sort of thing, because you're putting it out there. You're giving them the ability to take care of themselves. You're also giving them the ability to stop spreading disease in your own home. And you're also showing that it's important to do these types of things. And that is definitely important. But I want you to think about that. So you get into the house, you get into the party, you're hanging out. If you have hand sanitizer, you can use that. I prefer the soap and water. But definitely have yourself a backup. And if you're about to eat, make sure that you have washed your hands. Because that's something that a lot of people do, and you don't get it. It's not until 3 days later where you're running 103-degree temperature that you say, how did I get sick? How did that happen? Why did that happen? Why did I get sick? How did I get sick? And that's what's so interesting. How, why, when, all that kind of thing. How did I get sick and why did that happen is all very important knowledge base that we need to know. And if we don't know, we just get upset the fact that we're sick and we're laid up in bed, we're not feeling good, and we're not able to get the things done that we want to. We're not able to be social like we want to. And it adds to our existing stress or depression that we already have. Another thing that many of you don't think about, but this is very important to acknowledge, and it is the fact that if there are serving bowls, and there are bowls of popcorn and chips and candies and Skittles and nuts, remember, everybody else is digging into that bowl with their hands. And most people don't remember to wash their hands. So again, you are basically eating off their hand. I hate to tell you this, but the only way to be safe in the situation is to be the first one that puts your hands in that bowl, or not put your hands in the bowl at all. And so that might regulate you from having certain things that you want, but on the flip side, you don't get the thing that you don't want, which is the flu, the cold, strep throat, COVID, stomach virus, whatever that looks like. None of those things are on the menu for this year. that you want. And so be very careful because it can be transferred. Remember that these types of germs, some of these germs can live for a long time, for several days on a countertop. On a countertop. Not to mention something organic. So think about that. And really, honestly, is that popcorn worth it? Is that popcorn worth it? It's not. And I think that a lot of people take that, they don't realize it. And that's something to really think about too, is like, regulating our alcohol intake. Many times you might eat something at a party that you wouldn't normally eat at a party because you are needing food and sustenance because you have drank too much. And remember, when we drink too much, we usually push ourselves. When we drink too much, we usually stay up later than we would. When we drink too much, we usually wake up with a headache, hangover, not feeling very good. And that can lead to more stress and depression as well. And it's interesting, the more we drink, what I find is if you drink to excess, the next day is super painful. Now, some of you say, well, sometimes I can get super, aware, and I can get, really, really focused after I drink the next day. Okay, that's great. But you're still in pain. But I know that some of you have told me about the anxiety that you get the next day. And that anxiety can be super overwhelming. That anxiety can be super stressful. And that anxiety is what you don't want. Because when you're hungover and you have anxiety, it's very, very super painful because it presents itself a problem. And let me explain. So we're already hungover. We're already feeling bad about our choices. We're already a little down and anxious already because we're already dealing with this. And then on top of that, we add the anxiety component with the hangover. And that anxious anxiety hangover is what can put a lot of people into turmoil. It can put you into a real negative state of mind. And this whole purpose of today's show, today's radio show and a podcast, it's both. We're on the radio and we also make this into a podcast. We don't change anything. We just take out the commercials later. But that anxiety is what feeds a lot of people's depression. Because the alcohol was supposed to calm us down. The alcohol was supposed to help us forget what we were anxious about. And now we're super anxious again anyway. And so I want you to think about that. One of the best things you can do to stay well, and when I mean well, I'm not always just talking about you get the flu or the cold. I'm talking about staying well, not like, not having the anxiety hangover. Because the anxiety hangover is painful. It really, 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 really is painful. And it's something that we don't necessarily want to deal with. So if we don't have to deal with it, why do we? So I want you to really be aware of your alcohol intake coming into this, being aware of the alcohol intake, at these parties. And we're going to talk more. So stay tuned. I'm going to give you more tips and tricks on how to stay well and how to be well throughout the holiday season so you can feel and look and be your best. Stay tuned. Live your true life perspectives. We'll be back this time. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
Turn it up and jump in the deep end on Perspectives. Now, here's Ashley.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, I'm offering you some tips and tricks, insider information on how to stay well and happy all year long, but definitely during the holiday season. Whether it's the holiday season or not the holiday season, none of us want more stress in our life, none of us want more anxiety in our life, and none of us want more depression in our life. And how do we get more of that? Getting sick. Being sick adds to all of it, right? It makes it even worse than it already was. And so the last thing we want to do is to get sick. And so right before the break, I was giving you some tips and tricks on when we get into a party situation or an event, family's over.